Good evening, Patmos Chapel on this Sabbath day on the 8th of May. Welcome to It's the Stress That Are Blessed. I'm Dr. Esna Akamiro, coming live to you from ATL. And I have a very dear friend of mine, Dr. Randolph Brooks, who is joining us from Connecticut.
Happy
Good
Sabbath.
evening, sir.
Good evening. Good evening.
Happy Sabbath.
Happy Sabbath.
And I knew you before you were a doctor, and you knew me before I was a doctor.
Yes.
So we're going to keep it a little bit casual up in here. We've known each other for quite some time. But I did just want to give you your flowers before we get started. This series, it's the stress that are blessed, is really geared and focused towards us, particularly of people of who are blessed with melanin, to embrace our full health. So, not just our physical body, but also our emotional and spiritual bodies as well. Thank you to those in the chat. I see you. So, Dr. Randolph Brooks, coming to us from Connecticut, is a licensed professional counselor. He is currently the co founder of Brooks Psychological Services, serving Connecticut. And he is also the multicultural programming and outreach coordinator for student counseling services at Southern Connecticut State University. Now, Dr. Brooks, highly educated man, obviously, who apparently, true or false, knew you wanted to go into psychology very early on, seeing as how you got your bachelor's in psychology from Morehouse College here in Atlanta. We love our Morehouse men. So, love to see that. Then this is where we met in Richmond, where you got your master's in clinical psychology from Virginia State University, and then your PhD in health psychology from Virginia State University as well. So big up to all your HBCUs. I wish I had some of that, but I'm all PWI over here. However, the chips fell. So we will say big up to Morehouse and Virginia State on that. Something that you focus on is you really want to increase utilization of healthcare services and mental health services to the underserved and underrepresented communities. You are a current member of Mount Zion SDA Church in Hamden, Connecticut. However, we met at Ephesus in Richmond, Virginia. Shout out to EFI, you know how we do. Cap City, 804, all day, every day. Um, you are the husband to one wife, praise the Lord, and the father to one, RJ. And you are a firm believer that you can have God and a therapist. And I agree with you because I have both. All
Most
right.
therapists do.
So those who know. If you know, you know. All right. So, Dr. Brooks, again, thank you so much for starting off and kicking off this series. And honestly, I don't think I could have had a better person. Happy Sabbath, sir. I don't think I could have had a better person start off this series than you, especially with your focus on increasing the utilization of mental health services within underserved communities. So, give us a little background on you, how you got into psychology, and then particularly how you wanted to make sure that you address the needs of those that are underserved.
All right. So, real talk. When I was at Morehouse, I had no idea what I wanted to do. When I started
Okay.
college, I wanted to be an engineer, and then numbers turned into letters, and I was like, I can kind of follow you a little bit. And then when they started getting into the Greek, I'm like, you know what? I'm good. I gotta switch. I can't follow. And so I went over into pre-law. And pre-law was all right, but the books are like this.
Okay.
And you're like, I gotta read all that.
I
Yeah,
gotta know all that.
I'm good. I'm
Well,
good.
apparently, I'm not getting to politics. Go ahead, sir.
But my older brother, my older brother Jim, he's the one who told me, all right, we should go ahead and look at psychology because he was a psych major, but he was pre-med. And he had his professor who was telling him, like, from psychology, you can do almost anything. I'm more like, okay, I'll try that. I met Dr. Dwayne Jackson at Morehouse College, and he said the exact same thing. Psychologists know more about every other field than any field knows about psychology. So I'm all like, at the very least, I can do this and I can figure it out later. So when I got
where to go next?
Yes, exactly. I gotta get out. I gotta get out. Morehouse was great, but living in Atlanta, when you're broke, ain't fun. It's not.
Oh, okay, yeah, I guess because this is where the players play. Welcome to Atlanta.
Both
Atlanta.
Atlanta and Money Atlanta are two different Atlantas. So then when I got up to Richmond, when I got
quick plug.
Mhm.
Very quick plug. All right. So you and I, like I said, go way back before all the D's and the names and all that stuff. So I have to give a quick shout out to your mom and to your brother, the other Dr. Brooks, because Dr. Thorpe did really mentor me through the whole medical school process. So I want to say thank you, Mama Thorpe, for that. And she used to quiz me all the time, like she made sure I said my P's and Q's. And then also your brother, the other Dr. Brooks, who he probably does not even remember this, but I always remember it. Anatomy was like the litmus test, if you can do this medicine thing or not. And I remember he kept encouraging me so much through that class, and he even gave me his flashcards. So thank you, Jim Brooks, for that. I will always remember that. So our families go way back, and you're absolutely right. I think, go ahead.
Oh no, I was saying we do go way back, because I remember when I got to Richmond, and my brother was just like, yo, this med school thing is no joke. I'm all like, yeah, that's why I'm not trying to do it. But then we started going to church together, and you was telling me just how, like, you know, every day it's a struggle every day, but here you are.
But we made it. We made it to the other side, and that's the thing. I think, and I don't want people to take me the wrong way. I give people their due credit, because we need the life coaches. We need the relationship experts. We need as much help as we can to try to figure out our brain, our mind, what's going on, why we do the things we do, why we're triggered, the ways that we're triggered, how to treat people with courtesy and decency and respect, all of that. Yes, please, thank you. Seconds, thirds, and fourths. However, I just read your educational background. 4 years in psychology for a bachelor's, and then another 2, maybe
2.5 for the master's.
2.5 for the master's. And then how many for your PhD?
5. Yeah.
Excellent. That's 5 plus 4. Yes. That's a lot of years.
That long.
That's a lot of years studying the human brain. And yes, we can all give advice and, well, girl, when I did this and did that, this worked for me, this didn't work for me. But we are talking about somebody who has over a decade spending time learning about the human mind and the human psyche. And how to counsel people in some of the deepest, darkest spaces of their life. So when you speak, we really need to listen, and especially somebody who has some melanin that's popping, and has gone through the things that we have gone through and can relate to people that look like you. It's an honest blessing. So sorry, had to cut in there.
Oh, no.
But continue to tell us how you got. So, you know, so psychology was kind of you fell into that.
Yeah.
From the big brother.
Yeah.
From the big brother. Shout out to all the big siblings out there trying to guide our younger siblings as we trying to figure it out also. They're listening. So yes. Shout out to Kelly. We see you. So go ahead.
No, but that's the thing, because oftentimes when I was going through this process, I did need to talk to somebody else. I did need to have some sort of guidance along the way. And even going into Virginia State, I had an idea of how I wanted this to look, but after dealing with so many different internships, starting to recognize, yeah, I really do want to get into college counseling because everything else that I didn't like it. And so even though I realized I wanted to do psychology, I really didn't know where I wanted to do psychology until I got through all my internships and then getting
Okay.
into my pre-doctoral internship and then my postdoc, I recognized this is it. But one of the things that happened, my goal from Virginia State was to work at an HBCU. My goal was to get back down south because there ain't no HBCUs up here. I wanted to get down south because that's where we are. But not only is that where we are, but that's also where the services
Where the need, yeah, the need is high.
But
exactly.
I got to give a shout out to Ashanti Lukum.
Ah, okay. Hey, Lukum's in the house.
We were having a conversation over at Ephesus, and she was telling me that she was telling me that she was planning on working in public schools, and I'm all like, so you're going to be this high-powered teacher, but you're not going to go work in the church? You're going to go to the public school? And she brought up the point. Yeah, those kids need us too. And you're like, you are absolutely right. And so when you look at the same thing now, there are a lot of people of color in New England, whole lot of people of color in New England, but there are not a lot of practitioners. There are not a lot of practitioners of color in New England. So when you talk about trying to serve the underserved, oftentimes we think we need to go off into the far distant lands to go serve.
Really, you go on a mission trip.
Yeah. You don't need to say go on a mission trip. You can go to your backyard. Yes, because I look around when I was doing my postdoc at Connecticut College in a city called New London. We had a student who wanted a Black psychologist, but we were closed in the summer. So we were like, bet, we'll go find one for you in the city. There were 2 Black psychologists in this area of New London, me and my director. That was it.
And that's it.
That's it.
And that's real, because somebody, just as I was putting this program together, one of the other participants asked me if I knew a Black psychiatrist in Central Florida. And I could only think of one. And I think that's the issue that we're having, because a lot of times, and me being on both sides of medicine as a physician and as a patient, you really can tell a difference, I hate to say it, between people who see you as a human being and people who see you as patient XYZ. And sometimes it's not until they start to get into your personal business, or what do you do and this and that, do they start to say, oh, okay, let me do what I'm supposed to do because this person knows how it's supposed to look like. But to have somebody treat you as their daughter, as their friend, as a cousin, you look like my niece, you know what I'm saying? And then you get that personal experience with somebody. We don't see that a lot, and we don't get that a lot. And I think that turns a lot of people off from the medical, any kind of medical services at all, is not being treated well, because you're coming for help. And then when you're coming for help to be kicked while you're down, I think that's something that deters a lot of people, but is a reason why I do what I do and why you do what you do. So talk about why you wanted to do that age group.
Now, before we get into it, you just gave out my entire dissertation right there.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, that was the point. When we're looking at people wanting to get our underserved population services, the primary reason why they weren't getting services is because they didn't feel like the provider actually cared about them. You weren't a part of the community, and we get that. You're not always a part of the community. Okay. But what about you actually being someone who cares about me? Okay, so I live in Petersburg, Virginia, and I have to go out to Colonial Heights. We're not in the same area. Okay, I get that. But if I come to your office, how do you greet me? If I come to your office, do you even know my name? If I say I have a pain right here, do you actually, service that pain? Do you actually believe in that pain? Or are you saying it's no big deal? Now, we actually see that happen.
Because Black people don't feel pain.
Not at all. Not at all. We got super skin, We got super skin. We got Pain tolerance is like at 13, other people with pain tolerance is at 3. So, they don't need
Exactly.
that. Or they're med seeking. They're looking for drugs.
Exactly. Yep.
And so on either side, you can't win. And so when we're seeing people recognizing that this is the type of service that I'm going to get from a provider, I'm not going to listen. I'm not going to go. And it's the same thing when it comes with mental health services. If I remember, oh man, this is a story that happened when I was working at in Petersburg. There was someone who came into the hospital who was saying, I'm not feeling well. I'm feeling scared. I'm concerned that people are following me. Everyone else was saying, oh, he's paranoid. But I actually sat down and talked to him. And truth of the matter is, people were looking for him. So
imagine what that history taking will tell you.
Yes.
A good history will give you every diagnosis you've ever wanted to know.
And so, and also we're in that point of, are you actually listening? If you're not listening as a medical health provider, then I'm going to stop talking to you. And the thing is, we see that with our families as well. When my son, even though he can't really speak, he's only 16 months. But when he's making his sound, when he's making his babbles, my wife and I, we stop and we actually look at him. So we can actually show him that we are listening. No, now granted, we're not 100% perfect all the time, but the fact that we're trying to transmit to him that we are listening, because oftentimes are getting ignored. And we see that in not just Black and brown communities, but we're seeing it in all underserved communities. We're seeing it across this country. We're seeing that people are speaking out, and for the longest time, they weren't getting heard. So now we look around and we're saying we had this medical crisis. And so we want to now reach these people, have everybody get vaccinated and everything. But now you want to talk to me, but when I was trying to talk to you, you weren't listening. So why would I listen to you now?
That part. I mean, that part, exactly. It's convenient to come to us when you want to vote. But shout out to Georgia, y'all delivered. It's convenient to come to us when you want to hit that 70% vaccination. But when we are speaking about the things that we need, a lot of times our voices are not, the ones being heard. So I'm so glad that you said that. And I'm so glad that you're teaching him from a young age that when he speaks, it's important. And a lot of times we are raised, my dad's in the room, but particularly of people coming from other cultures where children are to be seen and not heard. And so you end up keeping a lot of your emotions, your feelings, what you want for yourself, your life to yourself, and searching out other people's dreams and what are going to make other people happy and not you happy. So now I'm, at another phase of my life where I'm learning me, and I wouldn't have had to do that necessarily if from a very young age I learned that, hey, if I want something that's important, or I'm gonna leave it at that. But go into, again, that age group, because I don't know if you probably don't know this, but there was a time when I was trying to figure out what I wanted to do in medicine. I had thought about pediatric psychiatry. However, after my rotation and crying every day on my way home, I decided, okay, maybe this is not for me. But that age group is so key. So you are dealing with college age kids. What drew you to that group?
A couple of things that really drew me to this group. When one of my last internships, actually it was a practicum. One of my last practicums, I was working at a geriatric hospital. And I would not see progress with these patients because you're in geri psych, you're on the downward end. So like every so often I'll see a patient who like have a moment of lucidity and I'm like, oh, this is who you really are. But then they'll revert right back to where they were. Prior to that, I was working in Richmond Public Schools. And so I'm trying
I
to do
see.
these interventions with these kids, and you'll see the interventions work with the children during that period that you have them in school. But then they're going to go home. And if that intervention is not reinforced at home, all the work you've done falls apart. So I've been on both ends of the spectrum, where I'm like, I'm not being fulfilled here because there's so many things that are outside of my control,
So many
or it's outside
variables.
of the control of my patient. But college students, you're right outside the house. You have that level of
Freedom.
autonomy, yeah, but you're also in a space in which you are able to access the service if you really want it. You know,
Yeah.
one thing that's unique about college counseling and college health in general, all the services are provided for you right there on campus.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't have to go look for you. I'm not going to your residence hall trying to find you for your appointment. But I know if you want the appointment, you can walk across
It's
campus.
there. That's
You can
right.
come right over here and get it. And we don't have to worry about your parents. Now, it's not that I don't care about parents. I love parents. But sometimes you need
They're the
that.
problem. It's like-
Sometimes they are. There are a couple of cases, and we're going to be able to get into this a little bit later, that we saw this through this pandemic. There were some kids who, it was their first time away from home, and they're freaking out because they've never been away from home. So they get to campus, and they're really nervous because they haven't been away. And they're feeling extremely anxious.
Mhm.
But as soon as the pandemic hits and they have to go home, everything is great. We can still work with you at home, preparing you to come back to campus. But knowing that all your anxiety has settled because you got home was fantastic. But then we have those other kids who, I need to get out of the house. Being at home is chaotic. Once you were on campus, everything was fantastic. But as soon as that pandemic hits and you have to go back home, your grades start to fall, your anxiety increases, your depressive symptoms increase. Well, we can work with that client as well, but we have to work within the parameters of you're now at home. So the idea of working with this particular population, you have brand new issues that come up, but at the same time, you have a level of autonomy that most of these kids did not have, 4, 5, 6 months ago. So we can actually get some work done. And the one thing that, of all the internships that I've ever done, the one thing that I get from college counseling that I haven't been able to get anywhere else is progress. Because we have these kids for 4 years. So we can see that growth.
Got you. Okay.
When you're over
Yeah.
here in Richmond Public Schools, for example, I have you for 1 year. You might be in the same school next year, you might not. I might be in the same school, I might be somewhere else next year. But with these students, we have you for all 4 years. So I love this example. The first year I was at Connecticut College, there was this young lady that came in, first time away from home, that classic college student, had graduated high school with a 3.9, was the salutatorian or something like that, was a perfect college student, but never been away from home. If she left and went anywhere, it was with her entire family. So this was the first time out of the house by herself for an extended period of time.
Right.
She was having significant anxiety every single day for the first month, because my first time in a new bed, my first time in a new room, my first time with some random person I never met before sleeping right next to me. I don't know why I'm doing this. I could have gone to school closer to home. My mom could be here. I could talk to my dad whenever I wanted. I could go see my little sister and my puppy and all that stuff. So working with her almost weekly, well, sometimes twice a week, because she had a crisis, for an entire month before she started to settle down enough to be able to sleep. Now, that same girl who's like, I'm not going to be able to do college, I'm not going to be able to do this, I need to go home. We can fast forward to 2020, and she's a college graduate. President of the class. We're talking about, we're talking about leader, the president of, can't remember the name of the organization. She was president of an organization, pledged a sorority. She did all these college experience things. Went on the senior class trip, went to some random place. But the point is, all these are things that she didn't think that she could do. All of these were experiences that she didn't think she was going to be able to have. And that's the type of progress that we can see working with students in college that I don't get a chance to see anywhere else.
Now, I'm glad that you mentioned that because I know anxiety is one of your specialty focuses, and I'm sure it's huge on college campuses and everywhere else. I am seeing talk. Okay, so I think everybody, correct me if I'm wrong, goes through some level of anxiety,
Oh yeah.
feeling anxious about whatever it is. Tell me when you get to a point where you feel like I need to do something about this, as opposed to, okay, this is a normal level of anxiety, a normal level of stress. When do I need to come and see you, or when can I just take a vacation
Mhm.
or deep breathe? Talk to us about how you diagnose anxiety, and then when you need to get help, and then the ways that we can get help.
Well, the thing about anxiety is, you're right. Anxiety is completely normal. All of us have, best way of describing anxiety is the fear of the unknown. So we don't know what to expect. So,
Right.
for example, when that guy says that, walks up to that girl and is like, "Hey, I think you're cute," you don't know. She could be like, "Okay," or she could be like, "Yeah, I feel the same way about you too." So when we're talking about anxiety, just that I don't know what's going to happen next. I'm concerned, but the difference with anxiety is it going to stop me from functioning? Like,
Okay.
it may be a case where, okay, I can't talk to that girl yet, but I can still live my life.
Right.
But we get to a point where I can't live my life anymore. So that example of that young lady from earlier, who couldn't sleep, you're starting to see you're having a problem here. Who couldn't go to class, or who couldn't go a day without crying in class,
Mhm.
even though nothing was happening. And there's a key to that as well, is what's going on, and that I'm anxious about something, but I know that there's nothing actually happening. So you recognize, I'm scared, I'm nervous, it's happening more often than not, and I know that nothing's actually happening. You
Okay. So
definitely don't need
it's
therapy for that.
so it's stopping you from your daily functions.
Yes.
And that's interesting because that's the same way we look at pain.
Hmm.
I know some decade or so ago, pain was the sixth vital sign. Everybody wanted to stop it dead in its tracks. We have figured out that was not the way now that we see the opioid crisis going on. But we decided as a medical community that our goal in pain is not to eliminate your pain, but to have you be functional with your
Yes.
pain. So what I'm understanding you saying is anxiety is normal about, not knowing what's going to happen because only God knows that, what
Yeah.
exactly is going to happen, but being able to have that, but be able to function well
Yes. And
despite that.
yeah, and even when you bring up the point about pain, anxiety is the same way, in the sense of, pain is your body telling you something. Hey,
Hmm.
we need to address something. Something is going on. We need to pay attention to your knee. You need to pay attention to your back. Something is going on there. We need to
Hmm.
figure out what's actually happening, because the pain isn't actually, well, sometimes the pain is the thing, but sometimes it's not the thing, right? It's
Correct.
you're saying that,
It's somatic.
oh,
It's
my knee,
psychosomatic. Hmm.
yeah, my knee's bothering me, but maybe it's an ankle problem, or my back's bothering me, but maybe it's a posture problem. It's the
Correct.
same thing with our anxiety. Oftentimes we know what we're feeling, but we don't know why we're feeling what we're feeling. And one of the things that we try to do, especially in mental health therapy, is trying to figure out, why are you feeling what you're feeling? Because we
Hmm.
already know what. You can tell me you're depressed, you can tell me you're anxious, but can you tell me why? What's going on? In some cases, it is that circumstance that's outside of our control. So, for example, we have people who are anxious because they don't know where their next check is coming from.
Hmm.
They don't know if they're going to be able to keep their job because they work in food service, and they're not sure if they're going to get shut down because of the pandemic. They
Exactly.
don't know, as a college student, if they're going to be on campus or off campus. They don't know if the person that's going to be assigned to be their lab partner is vaccinated or not, or they don't know if the person that is coming to their door has been wearing their mask all day. I'll give you a prime example of a client that I have now, who, she is what's marine biology major, and she's in the lab. And because it's an actual lab, they have to actually go on campus for class. So she's like, I have no problem being in the lab. I have no problem going to campus. But I see my classmates on TikTok. I see my classmates on Snapchat, and they're out at the club and they're not wearing
Social
masks.
media will tell your whole life, boy, if you let it.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so she's seeing her classmates, her lab partners, out at the club, out at the bar, not wearing masks. And she's like, I'm supposed to be sitting next to you for 3 hours tomorrow. I am worried. And so that is normal. That anxiety right there is normal. What does she do about it? She goes, gets her mask, she gets a face shield, and she goes to class. But she's nervous the entire time. And so that's one of the things that we're talking about with that anxiety. Recognizing, well, where is it coming from? Why is this anxiety a thing? And that's the thing that often gets missed, as you're pointing out. We try to just gloss over it. We just want the anxiety symptoms to go away, but the underlying issue is still there.
Gotcha. So in her case, she was able to do something proactively to protect herself since she had this information. But for people who are, say, back to your other example about talking to that girl, when can you say, okay, I'm anxious, I'm a little bit more anxious than I should be? Like, what are some techniques that I can use to help me kind of get through that? And then what are the signals that tell me, okay, I need to go see somebody? And then talk about what things you would help them with. Particularly, I know you talked about the question, but figure out why. And then once you find out why, and then what you do.
So when it comes to actual therapeutic practices for anxiety in general, there are a myriad of them. One of the most common ones is the deep breathing. And there are 1,000 different ways of doing deep breathing with specified goals in mind. I don't know how many of us actually used to watch cartoons back in the day, but I remember watching old, really old cartoons. And
you're not gonna give us an example?
Was it?
You're not gonna give us an example?
Oh no, I'm gonna give you an example.
Okay.
The one that sticks in my head right now is the Woody Woodpecker cartoon. And yes. And what he did in this episode was he pecked at a tree branch until it fell on somebody's head. And the person had to count to 10 before they did anything about it. So you just see them counting 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And every time the woodpecker did it, they would count faster. Now, the idea is when you do a counting like that, you want to count slow. But the goal is, so counting 1 to 10, for example, the goal of that is to lower your respiration, you want to lower your heart rate. You want to actually get a chance to think about what's happening. Yes. And the reason why we do counting in particular is because we want you to focus on something else. So instead of focusing on the branch that just landed on your head or focusing on the woodpecker that's laughing at you, focus on these numbers so you can calm down, and then you can actually start to address what's actually happening. So it's that same thing when it comes to anxiety. When we do a count to 10, we want that, lower your heart rate, slow your breathing down, focus on just right now. So we can then look at what's going on. Other practices that are used for this are also called mindfulness practices. And so in some cases, it may be like you're sitting in a chair. I want you to, how often do we actually sit in a chair and think about the chair? Like, do you actually feel the chair that you're sitting on right now? Some people do. Other people are like, never thought about it. It's just a chair. I'm just here. And so mindfulness, again, you're slowing down so that you can actually think about what are you doing? Are you feeling the chair on your back? Are you feeling the air in the room? When we talk about those sorts of mindfulness practices, some people look at it as like it's this new agey sort of thing. And really, the goal for all of this is still the same. It's to slow down. When we get into an anxious spiral, We start thinking this thing leads to this thing, leads to this thing, leads to this thing, leads to this thing, leads to this thing. And before you know it, you're telling yourself you're going to be homeless. And like, there's a lot of steps before that. So we're going to stop right here and get to where we are so that we can actually move forward.
Correct. You are so right, because that is me. I will like take it and just like let it go until the worst thing ever in life has happened to me. But you are
Yes.
so correct. And so one of the things that I've had to work on is mindfulness. And then my therapist had recommended Headspace, which I really started to enjoy. And it's like the amount of time that can pass in like 5 minutes, you think you just spent an hour, because you
Yes.
have literally just slowed your whole life down. And for some reason, I have now fell in love with trees, just like looking at the trees, whether it's
Yeah.
rain, sunshine, whatever, and just enjoying the nature kind of that God gave us. But you are absolutely right. Just being able to slow down. The eviction moratorium is still in place. You're not going to be homeless
Hmm.
just yet. And just really take control and enjoy that second that you have. Because I'm the type, I will, in that 5 seconds, if you let me, I will think of all the things I need to do and let that literally drive me crazy, and then even paralyze me from actually doing that thing.
Yes.
Um, but I have learned that that's not the way to do it. It has gotten me, I'm not gonna lie, it has gotten me to this point in my life. But when you want to go further, you have to start making some changes. I couldn't do the same study skills that I used in undergrad to be successful in medical school. That would not have worked. And so, same thing with stages. You just have to learn new skills, new coping mechanisms to get you through certain things, because life continues to change.
And that's the thing about it,
Now,
like I said, it worked for you before. So a lot of people will stick with that
mhm,
and will have difficulty adjusting to that new thing. So even as you pointed out, um, nobody stops to look at the trees because they have a thousand things they have going on right now. And oftentimes we do have a thousand things going on. But when we talk about anxiety, how many of those things are actually in your control?
mhm,
That's another point of mindfulness. We're looking at what's actually in your control, because we will freak ourselves out about all this stuff that's going to happen, not going to happen, might happen. How much of that is actually in our control? Very little. Very little.
mhm.
Most of the stuff that we concern ourselves with are things that are outside of our control. Now, with that being said, I'm not saying just ignore all of that stuff, but it's about putting it in its proper perspective. If I know that I can't control this, I may pay attention to it, but I'm not
Mhm.
going to try to change it because I can't. I'd see that that's happening. What am I going to do about it? Respond in a particular way, and that's it.
Exactly. Now, you talked about anxiety being able to kind of lock us into inaction. But I think another big thing that's locking people into inaction is depression. And I know you said that's something else that you focus on a lot, with that population as well. So if you
Yes.
could kind of give us your definition, DSM, what are we, four, five now? DSM five,
Yeah, wrong.
on on depression, how you diagnose it, things that people need to look for, um, and especially when they need to get treatment.
Now, the thing about depression, it's it's different in the sense of with anxiety, we're worried about all these things that we don't know, all these things that can come, all these things that could potentially happen. With depression, oftentimes we're thinking about what's already happened. The thing that they both have in common
Okay.
is most of the time it's about stuff that's outside of our control. We can't control the future. We don't know the future. We can't change the past. The past has already happened. But stuff that's going on are things I don't like, things I want to change if I could, but we can't. When it comes to depression, it's just like anxiety with respect to we all think about stuff that's happened in the past. We all think about things that, man, I wish I would have done that differently. Or if I knew now what I knew then, What would I do differently and all that sort of thing, right? But let's be honest, what are we gonna do
My
about
whole life would be different.
it? Yes. No, what are we gonna do? Nothing. There's nothing we can do about that. But just like in anxiety, where all this stuff is common, we do it all the time. Does it get to a place in which it impacts your functioning? Does it get to a place in which you can't do your life right now? That's when it becomes a problem. And so for a lot of people, we're just like, man, I really shouldn't have had that extra slice of pizza. Now my stomach hurts. But you go ahead and you do life. We get to that place of, man, I really regret that thing that happened 15 years ago. And you're still thinking about it. And now I can't function. That's when we start looking at, well, not start, we already are having some problems at that point. The thing about depression is oftentimes with depression, we quote unquote suffer in silence. So we aren't telling people what's going on. It was just happening. We are going through life. People are asking you, hey, how are you doing? I'm good. I'm fine.
Yeah.
Not telling anybody what's going on. The thing about depression is people go through life depressed on a regular basis, and we would never know. At the very least, we can have those examples of people like Robin Williams or Chester
Have mercy.
Barrington. I think that's his last name.
Anthony
singer.
Bordeaux.
Yeah,
What's the lady's name? Kate Spade.
yeah.
You know, we think of all of these people, rich, money, seem to be living perfectly happy lives, and you would never have known they would have felt depressed to the point of taking their own life. You know, and we were talking about it before we came on, that the numbers in the Black community are rising to alarming rates, because at, you know, one point we were saying that was one thing we didn't have to worry about. We didn't have to think about as much. But now suicide has become the 10th leading killer amongst all Americans. And then within young adults, I think 18 to 34, it's the second leading cause of death. It's people taking their own life.
And the demographic in which that rate is highest is Black teenagers. So the rate, and I'm talking about the rate, we're talking about the rate of people committing suicide. That number has shot up for Black teenagers. Now, the reason for that, you know, there are a lot of different factors at play. But what we want to pay attention to is we're dealing with a population that feels like they can't talk. They can't tell people what's going on. They can't let people in. And when we talk about,
now, why is that? Why do people feel like, what do you think is holding people back from saying, I don't want to talk about how I'm feeling?
well, there's historically, we said in our community, oh, that's what white people do. We don't do that. That's a white people thing, which historically that's inaccurate. Also, we are in this space in which we're like, get over it, move on. We talked about how
I'm too blessed to be stressed.
hey. But even when we talked about how, look at how young boys and young girls are socialized. Toughen up, suck it up.
Yeah.
Don't do that. Boys don't cry. That sort of thing. Where you don't actually get a chance to get in touch with your feelings. So actually know, what are you feeling? To actually be able to put a label on what you're feeling, put words to your feelings.
Use your words. Exactly. And as we were talking about before, the shout out to I Am Athlete, Brandon Marshall and his team. I know that he's been diagnosed, I think, with bipolar, I think maybe schizophrenia, something of that nature. I'm not sure. But they talk about mental health a lot. And, you know, a clip that I saw that you posted and liked on Facebook was when he talked about how you socialize boys and girls. And he talked about his two young twins. One is a boy, one is a girl, and how, you know, if they both fell down, scrape their knee, the girl, oh, I'm so sorry, you know, coddle her and all of that. But then if it was the boy, man, toughen up, man. Boys don't cry. Like, what you doing? You know? And I think that is part of it that we are raised that way, to
Yes.
think that your feelings do not have to be validated, and that you can push those things aside, um, and just get on with the day. And I'm realizing, like I said, that I need to be in touch with my feelings and my emotions, because it's important, not just for my spiritual health, but I'm also realizing that that's another way that God communicates with us as well. If I'm feeling anxious about something, I'm feeling sad about something, if I'm feeling uneasy about something, if I'm feeling confused about something, God is not the author of confusion, neither can be. And so a lot of times we need to realize that some of that stuff is God talking. It's not just the pizza
Mhm.
that you ate too late last night. Some of that is God talking to us and telling us, hey, don't go that way. That's that voice telling you from
Yeah.
behind, from the left, go to the left or go to the right, go straight, whatever it is. So yeah. So how then, most people, if you ask, and that's how we were trained, you just ask the question,
Mhm.
are you depressed? And most people can tell you they're depressed, yay or nay. But from the outside looking in, what are the things that we see in our family, friends, coworkers that would tell us this person is probably depressed? And then how do you bridge that conversation?
Well, a couple of things. Um, Taking a one step back for a second, when it comes to the way, especially blacks in America behave, oftentimes we're trained to behave a particular way as a survival strategy.
Yes,
No, you don't show your emotion. When you feel scared, you tighten up. When you
exactly.
feel offended by somebody, especially someone in authority, you don't say nothing. You shut your mouth because we want you to survive.
Correct. You
And
need your job.
yes, so there have been days where like if this person say one more thing to me, I'm gonna snap, right?
They're gonna see my other side.
Yeah, but we suck it all up because it's a survival technique for us. But also, when it comes to ways you let that stuff out, so you sucking all this stuff up at home at work, how do you let it out when you get home? No, are you now taking it out on your family? Are
Correct.
you
Samuno.
going to the gym and working out? Are you just grabbing a tub of ice cream and just eating your feelings? Like, how are you releasing
Dealing.
your emotions?
Right.
Are you
Because it's
talking
gonna
about
come out. It's gonna come out.
yes, in
Yeah.
one way or another, it will come out. So the idea is, again, going to a therapist, you're, you're letting that stuff out in a healthy, safe space. So you're not hurting yourself, you're not hurting anyone else, because we see it often where people get angry and instead of saying or expressing their anger or their frustration to the person or the situation that's actually made them angry, you take it out on someone who has no idea what's going on. You go home and you start screaming at your spouse. Like, all I did was say hi. What's all this? Or those people who have real
Exactly.
bad road rage. Like, I didn't cut you off.
Exactly.
Why are you
And that's
mad?
that phrase, who hurt you? When
Mm-hmm.
somebody's acting a certain way to you for no reason, you just like, who hurt you? Because clearly I just said good morning.
Yeah.
So yeah. So I think we definitely do see a lot of that. So go ahead.
And then, no, but then also when you're talking about we're never really going to know how someone is actually feeling unless they actually tell you. But there are some things that you can pay attention to. And one
Okay.
of those big things that we pay attention to is a change in behavior.
Okay.
So, for example, that person who used to be the life of the party, if you will, that person who was the extrovert in the office, all of a sudden they're quiet. You know, that's just a change in behavior. And oftentimes we have a bad day, we have a bad morning, but we snap out of it.
Hmm.
When you see that persistent change in behavior, so yeah, you've been quiet now for a few days. Everything all right? That person may say, "Oh yeah, I'm fine. Just got a lot of stuff on my mind." You want to talk about it, depending on how close you are. And
Hmm.
that's another victim. That's another victim of this pandemic: closeness. Now I know I'm just jumping around, but we'll get back to this thing in one quick second.
No,
But
no,
we
no.
had
Keep
these,
going. That's good.
but we had these relationships with people in person. that we don't have right now. And so a lot of people do get have gotten disappointed and have gotten a different level of sadness because they aren't as close as they were before, not physically close. So I go to my office twice a week. We're required to be on campus halftime. So in order to maintain social distancing in my office, only one person is there. So I have not seen my coworkers in over a year and a half outside of being on the computer. I have not seen them in a year and a half. One of my coworkers in particular, she tells everybody as soon as you meet her, she says, "I'm a hugger." That woman has not hugged anyone.
Imagine what she's going through. Yeah.
Yes, and she has elderly parents. So everybody's gotten vaccinated in her family now. So now she's hugging everybody. But she used to say, for the longest time, I just miss my parents. I want to give them a hug. I haven't seen them since March. I really miss them. I know that they're okay. We talk every day, but she hasn't gone to their house, and they live right down the street.
Now let's talk about that. Okay. So especially during this pandemic, I'm hearing two big schools of thought, right? Or two big categories that people are falling into. One is you have the single person like myself who, being in healthcare, I can't stay home. So I'm dealing with all the work stuff. And then I don't want to say I'm used to death, but I've come to terms with seeing death on a regular basis. However, not to this magnitude. So that was an illness, not to this magnitude. So that's something that's been weighing on me mentally. But normally I can go home. I can go out with friends. I can go to church. I can do different activities. I can travel, blah, 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 blah. Now, the only thing waiting for me at home is my couch and that vegan ice cream that's in the freezer. And at first, to be honest, because I can be both introvert and extrovert, back and forth, that was fine. But then after 6 months goes by, another 6 months goes by. Now it's a year, and then we're going on to 18 months, and it's a lot where it's like I am by myself, and you really start. And the things that I used to look forward to, like for my family, Thanksgiving is a really big holiday. So the fact that we had to cancel Thanksgiving is just like, I think that's when I really felt like this is like pandemic for real. And then you hear the other coin, the other side of the coin, where people who are married with children or multiple generations in the household, and they've had enough. They don't want to see their spouse anymore. And you're hearing all these, Bill and Melinda Gates, RIP to their marriage. You're seeing these decade marriages end, people falling out, all this kind of stuff. So talk to the singles, talk to the married with families, how to deal with this new normal, I guess, that we're going to be going through. And I know things are starting to open back up, but the damage, some of that mental damage, has been done. And if anybody has any questions, comments in the chats, please feel free to put that in there, and then we can have our expert, Dr. Brooks, address those. I know I said a lot, so I'm going to be quiet and let you talk.
But you got to remember, you said it. When you were an undergrad, you studied one way. When you went to med school, you had to study a different way. And then when you were studying for your boards, you probably had to study a different way because you're now doing boards and working in the whole 9 yards. So what we have to recognize is adjustments have to be made. So first, I'm speaking to those people who are married. The issue that we ran into with a lot of these marriages is you had space. You had space where you go your separate way in the morning. You come back home in the evening. You can actually talk about the day and everything like that. There was room for growth because you had experiences that you can talk about with each other. Now you're like, all I got is you. Like in the beginning, oh yeah, this is great. I get to spend time with my spouse who I haven't seen like this since we were dating. It's great. Then all of a sudden, yeah, so you're still here.
You go.
Yeah. And so when we're thinking about it, how do we adjust? God has made us in a way that we adjust to situations. The problem
Mhm.
that we typically run into is at times, especially when we're stressed out, we don't have the mental capacity to be creative enough to adjust. And that's where we run into issues. You have to be creative enough to adjust. So as you were saying, um, when you're single, you have all these things that you can do. You can run the city and do whatever you want to do, and everything is good. You got no one to answer to, and life is
Mhm.
yeah, that's true. But then when you have to adjust because
You
now
need somebody.
well, not just that, but also all those techniques that you used, your original
It's
coping
gone.
strategies are no
Yeah.
longer available, and that's really been the key. So when we're looking at how do I cope, how do I want to actually get through life? So, for example, do I have to be more intentional with the conversations that I have with certain people?
Okay.
Do I have to start making friendships with people who I wouldn't normally make friendships with? You know, one of the things we think about when it comes to being a single person who actually leaves and goes to work and all that, you're still around a lot of people. But how many of those people do you actually want to be around?
I was waiting for you to say it. I was waiting for you to say
and, and
it.
that's the truth. When we're around a lot of people, we're in a time in which I could pick and choose who I
Mhm.
want in my life. Now we don't have that same level of autonomy, but we are still around certain people. But how do I actually want to be with this person? How do I want this person to be in my life? And that's when we look at the control that you actually do have. So you go to work, you're working around these other doctors, these nurses, a whole group of people. How do you want them in your life? Do you want them to be my bestie? Do I want you to know everything that's going on in my life? Or do I want you to just be someone that I can trust at work to do their job? You know, we have to recognize that there's the control that we have in our relationships in which it comes to I don't need you in my life to enhance it, but maybe I do want someone to talk to just about randomness. Who
Shoot the
gets down
breeze.
on my level when it comes to talking about music? Who gets down on my level when it comes to talking about certain TV shows or whatever the case may be? I've made some friendships with people on campus who I like, for real though, like, just because you're here, we gonna talk. Because I need someone to talk to. Like, you
And
know,
that's true. And
that's what it is.
yes, no man is an island. We were created to be social beings, and we need that closeness. And I think it's so key what you said. Everybody does not have to feel every need.
Mhm.
You can have your person that you can talk to, about sports, and then the other person who's another movie buff,
Yeah.
or that, you know what I mean, or that person who's your ride or die when it comes to biblical things, like, oh, did you
Mhm.
see what the Sabbath school lesson said, or da 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 da, whatever it is. Like you can, I don't want to say put people in categories, but
That's kind of what
there
it
are
is.
those things.
There's nothing wrong
There are
with it.
those needs, yes, that we need to be filled, and your spouse does not have to fill every checkbox, for you, and neither do you fill every checkbox for them, and every friend does not have to fill every need, and vice versa.
Now you brought up an important point because we do have categories of our friends. Well, the way I describe it is I have my colleagues, I have my associates, I have my friends,
Mhm.
I have my family. You know, everybody fits into somewhere. And the fact of the matter is, no, that's great. Now, there are certain things I will talk to my colleagues about that it's just right here. So I'll talk to you about what's going on campus. I'll talk to you about certain programs. We will meet up and have dinner about programs. Like, my wife
Mhm.
doesn't believe me when I say these sorts of things. But I'm all like, yo, we having a dinner meeting tonight. Like, we are actually going to go to dinner and we are going to talk about these programs that we are putting together on campus. And then there are the people that I associate with. These are people who I will do a program with. These are people who I will, talk about my family life about a little bit, a little bit. Then there are those,
No
then there's
further.
actual friends. Those are those people who, if you call me, I'm going to come through. I will have my mask on. Now, I'm not going to my colleague's house. I'm not going to my associate's house. I will go to my friend's house. We're going to have our mask on. We're going to be masked up. We are going to actually go through this, whatever it is that we're dealing with, because you my boy, you my friend. No, then there's family. And, there are family who are all like, yo, I'm going to come through regardless of what's happening. I may not get on the plane. It's going to take me a while to drive down there, but I'm going to be there. Again, we're going to be masked up, but, I'm not taking, 12-hour road trips in the middle of a pandemic for just anybody.
Correct.
Now,
and
back to,
Oh, so I was going to say, so on this topic of depression, so we do have somebody that would like more information in regards to self-help materials for depression. I know the National Suicide Prevention Hotline is there, 1-800-273-8255, which is 1-800-273-TALK. But talk to us about some self-help things for feeling depressed, but then also when you need to get help, where to go, including your own counseling services, because there's some people who may want to reach out to you.
Now, the thing is, when it comes to self-help for depression, it gets to be somewhat nebulous, because anyone who's dealing with depression to the scale of needing to see a therapist, we don't want you to stick with just self-help only. Self-help is good, but self-help is what you would do as a form of primary prevention. So knowing that just life in general, we all need to go through mindfulness exercises, whether or not you're feeling anxiety or depression or not. Mindfulness is just good practice, period. But we were talking about someone who is now experiencing depression, as you were pointing out, the suicide hotline, that is a big thing. That is a 24/7 resource available to everyone for free. We can also look at helpguide.org, and we'll have different coping strategies when it comes to dealing with depression. Again, that is helpguide.org. I will put some of these into the chat as well. But then also looking at Psychology Today. The thing about Psychology Today is we will often use that as a resource to find a therapist, but that's not all Psychology Today is. Psychology Today is actually a publication that does have curated resources as well. So you can look at psychologytoday.com, or you can go to helpguide.org. And there are a myriad of resources that talk about depression. But when we're actually looking at getting some help for depression, that is when we wanted to start looking at going to an actual mental health provider. Now, there are a million ways of getting access to a mental health provider. The thing about our resource in particular at Brooks Psychological Services is we are only licensed in Massachusetts and Connecticut. However, we can definitely help people find a resource wherever they are. The issue with finding a resource wherever they are is you will still have to take that next step. And that is one of those big problems that we have when it comes to getting mental health services in general, is because what we really want in a provider is a connection. And I can't help make that connection. I can help show you where those connections can be. But when it comes to you being in front of that person, that's when, the rubber meets the road. And the thing about mental health providers, I have to be honest with you. We are not a good fit for everyone. There are some providers who you will meet, you will love, and they'll be great. There are other providers, as soon as you talk to them, you're like, ugh, you won't get me at all.
You went to school for that? Exactly. Did you?
Exactly. But we got to remember, that's just people. You meet people all the time.
Exactly.
You're like, yo, you cool. You get me. I like you.
Yes.
Then there are
everybody's
other people
not going to click.
So if you don't click, don't give up. That just means you just need to find somebody else.
Just keep going. Exactly. And that happened to me too, where I had to kind of test some people out and really see who my soul clicked with, who happened to be another Black female Christian, so that we had some of those same foundational pieces that
Mhm.
allowed us to click. And then personality too. She likes New Edition, so hey, so we good on that. But just to wrap it up, because we have gone over time, and I feel like we could do this forever. And like I said, we may have to make this a recurring series, because I think a lot of people have questions, and a lot of people, some of these things we really need to dive a little bit deeper into, because they are so weighty and so heavy. But I do want to give you a chance to kind of give your closing thoughts, comments. Again, plug psychological services, Brooks Psychological Services, because we love to see Black businesses, we love to see Black professionals, because people need that connection, especially from another Christian, because we know that you now can have God and a therapist.
And the thing about having God and a therapist, we also have to remember, we as people are just that, people. And what does that mean? No, it sounds like I'm talking around in circles. The thing about it is, we're no different from anybody else. No, the same pandemic that I'm feeling, that I'm experiencing, everybody in this chat is experiencing, the resources that we have are different. And that's the only thing. The thing about it is, we, Black mental health professionals, Black medical professionals, we in part have that goal of leveling that playing field. Part of the reasons why we're seeing people in these professions is because they noticed that they weren't there. They've noticed that the care was different. They've noticed that you're the one provider in the area, and we want to change that. And what we're meaning is, as we move forward, when it comes to this type of work, it's an ongoing struggle, but it's a struggle that we are willing to take because we know that there is equity that needs to be done, that we need to have for everybody.
There you go. And last that I will say, once again, from what you said earlier, if you are feeling extremely anxious, if you're feeling depressed, then some of these things are not self-help. Some of these things are not DIY. You need to seek out professional help. And there are people like Dr. Brooks and Dr. and Mrs. Alfred Booker Sr., who will be with us next week on the 15th at 7 p.m. To spill more tea on my personal life, but also to talk about some family counseling services that they provide to their conference. And so, Dr. Brooks, I just want to say thank you so much for starting us off with It's the Stress That Are Blessed. Why? Because they know they need help. And like the publican, they're willing to ask that help of a professional, not just a psychological professional, Jesus Christ as a professional, savior, healer, friend, all of the above. So thank you so much, Dr. Brooks. Thank you all who are watching and listening. We appreciate it. We thank you so much for your comments. Thank you. We love you. And like I said, we'll be here next week at 7 p.m., May 15th, with Dr. and Mrs. Alfred Booker. And thank you so much again, Dr. Brooks, who I knew before you were a doctor, representing Ephesus Seventh-day Adventist Church, Richmond, Virginia, 757. Shout out to the 804 Cap City, all of the above. I love you, and hopefully we can do this again.
Yes.
Shout out to your wife,
Amara.
Mrs. Brooks, RJ. Shout out to your mom, Dr. Thorpe, and Dr. Jim Brooks. We love the Camaros, love the Brooks family. So
there's like three Dr. Camaros now, right? And see number 2 on the chat right now, right?
We roll deep. You know how we do. We do deep. We go deep.
Thank you for having me again.
All right. Well, you're very welcome. Brooks Counseling Services, Massachusetts and Connecticut. Holla at him. I can vouch for him. All right. Thank you so much, Patmos Chapel, Seventh-day Adventist Church and friends. Coming to you live and direct from ATL. Maybe I'll be in Florida next week, but we will be here. Thank you again.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.